Hello, friends, and welcome to Conversations with Consequences. We are the radio show and podcast of the Catholic Association, where we aim to change the culture one conversation at a time. You can listen to Conversations with Consequences on the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network, Saturday mornings at 7 a.m. Eastern, or catch the encore at 5 p.m. We are also on Sirius XM Channel 130. Of course, our radio show is always a podcast. Go to thecatholicAssociation.org/podcasts or directly to wherever you listen to your podcasts. I'm your hostess, Dr. Grazie Christie, and we have a special show for you today. We have as our special guest, Cardinal Raymond Burke. He is, of all the prelates of the Church, one of my great favorites for his staunch defense of the truths of our faith, especially in this age where truth is considered something so elusive that we can't possibly find it. Well, I don't think that's true, and neither does Cardinal Burke. He was appointed in 2010 by Pope Benedict XVI. He was named a cardinal then. He writes and speaks widely on Roman Catholic canon law, on the Holy Eucharist, on the devotion to the Sacred Heart of Jesus, and particularly this week, which is the week when we celebrated the Assumption of our Blessed Lady, of our Blessed Mother. He has a great devotion to Our Lady of Guadalupe, and 15 years ago, I think the anniversary was this past month, he founded the Shrine of Our Lady of Guadalupe in La Crosse, Wisconsin. And that's a beautiful shrine that participates with the other shrine of Our Lady of Guadalupe, the main one in Mexico City, as a center of pilgrimage. Many thousands of pilgrims visit the shrine in La Crosse as though they were visiting, and in the same spirit that they would visit the shrine of Our Lady of Guadalupe in Mexico City. So we're very glad to have him today. No, first, before we go to that, I wanted to mention something that's in the news that to me was very disturbing, and I'm sure you'll find it disturbing too. In Massachusetts, a Catholic couple was denied by the state the ability to adopt through foster care because of their religious beliefs, which happen to be just Catholic run-of-the-mill beliefs. This was done because they were felt to not be possible fit parents for a child or a teen that might identify as non-heterosexual, and this brings us to a very difficult place in our American history, because since same-sex marriage was legalized, there was this danger that people who can't accept the propriety, of these of same-sex marriage, for instance, and same-sex relations, would be put out of the public square and not allowed to participate. Justice Alito said in his dissent to Obergefell, which was that case that decided same-sex marriage, he wrote, "It will be used to vilify Americans who are unwilling to assent to the new orthodoxy. In the course of its opinion, the majority compares traditional marriage laws to laws that denied equal treatment for African Americans and women. The implications of this analogy will be exploited by those who are determined to stamp out every vestige of dissent." I think we can take a moment to pray for all people of faith living in this new reality, and also pray for this one couple in Massachusetts that their case, which is being taken up by the Becket Fund for Religious Liberty, will find justice, and they'll be allowed to adopt even though they are Catholics. Welcome to the show, Your Eminence.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
Ever since we started this radio show, which I think we have about 250 episodes so far, we've really wanted you to be on, because here at the Catholic Association, we're great admirers of Cardinal Burke and all the wonderful work you've done for the Church over the years. You don't remember me, Your Eminence, but we met. You ordered my dinner for me one night.
My goodness.
Yes, in a beautiful Roman restaurant outside on the Via Appia. I forget the name now. Archaeology, something like that.
Oh, Archaeologia, yes.
Yes, a beautiful place. And you ordered my dinner. You suggested I have something, and then you ordered it in your beautiful Italian. And I talked about that for years because Cardinal Burke ordered my dinner. So it's wonderful to see you again.
Well, thank you.
And wonderful to be able to say that here at Conversations with Consequences, we very much appreciate you.
Well, thank you very much, and pray for me.
Yes, you are in my prayers, definitely, and I hope that all our listeners also include you in their prayers.
Yes, I hope so too.
Your Eminence, this week when our radio show airs, it will be the Feast of the Assumption. That's, to so many of us Catholics, as it should be. That is a feast that is that is a beautiful feast day of the Church, which tells us that Our Lady is present, body and soul, in heaven, and is watching out for us, just like our mothers did when we were little, but now in a way that's so many more possibilities. What she can do for us in heaven.
It's a beautiful doctrine of the faith, and one that gives us so much consolation and encouragement, because we know that our Blessed Mother will never fail to be our mother, and that from her place with our Lord in heaven, she's watching over us and trying always to bring us closer to him. So it's really a wonderful feast.
Father, you have a very beautiful connection to Our Lady. You built and dedicated the Shrine of Our Lady of Guadalupe in La Crosse, Wisconsin.
Yes.
I grew up in Mexico, and Our Lady of Guadalupe she's the queen of Mexico. But she's the queen of our entire continent, right?
Surely. Yes, Pope St. John Paul II insisted. He said, America is one continent divided artificially by a man-made canal, but that Our Lady, when she came to Mexico City, in a certain way in the center of the continent, she came for all of America, not just for Central or Latin America, but also for North America. And that was one of my inspirations when I wanted to build a shrine to Our Lady. I thought we began the work after the Holy Father had issued his letter on the Church in America, in which he made that point so strongly. And then I thought, no, the title for Our Lady at the shrine will be Our Lady of Guadalupe.
Mm-hmm. So she's the Empress of the Americas, and as you say, she unites all the land masses that make up the Americas, and all the people that live in the Americas under her mantle, and that's a very beautiful image. Do you think of her mantle when you think of Our Lady like we do?
I oftentimes, in fact, say that to people in closing letters and things, that I pray that Our Lady will either hold them in her embrace, or that she will have them cover them with her mantle, under the protection of her mantle. And I had a very direct and poignant experience of this myself. I was very ill in August of 2021 with a life-threatening case of the contagion of the COVID virus, and actually was put on a ventilator for 9 days and sedated. I no memory of those 9 days, but when I came out from under the sedation, I had this very almost palpable sense that Our Lady had been holding on to me, had me under her mantle during that whole time, and that she was the one who saved me, because the doctors, in fact, had given up hope. They didn't believe there was anything more that could be done to save my life. But in fact, through so many prayers, and I believe especially through the intercession of Our Lady of Guadalupe, my life was spared. And so many pilgrims who come to the shrine here tell me the same thing, that they're praying before the image of Our Lady, before it's right above the tabernacle and just behind the altar of sacrifice, and that they have a strong sense of her presence with them, and giving them comfort and strength.
Do you think that Our Lady revealed herself in a very special and particular way when she revealed herself to San Juan Diego? What do you think about that way that she presented herself in that moment?
It's a rather unusual apparition in many respects. First of all, from the very first moment that she encounters St. Juan Diego, as you know well, she began on December 9th, and the last apparition was on the 12th. But from the very first apparition, she identifies herself immediately as the Virgin Mother of God, and she also immediately announces her purpose, that she wants a chapel built, a little house, as she said, built, in which she can show Christ, her divine Son, to all the people in all his mercy and his love. The account of the apparitions is something very beautiful to read. It's not very long, and it goes back to the very time of the apparitions, written by Antonio Valeriano, a good friend of St. Juan Diego, the messenger. But yes, so that's rather unusual, that everything is very definite and clear and takes place in a few days. And on the 12th, of course, of December, when St. Juan Diego, the bishop, had asked him for a sign from Our Lady that it was really she who was appearing, and he had gathered these beautiful roses on the top of Tepeyac Hill, which at that time was winter, and it was just a thorny, rocky place. There were no beautiful roses growing there, but he found them and brought them down. Our Lady arranged them in his mantle. When he opened it to present these roses to Our Lady, this is also most unusual. Our Lord imprinted her image on the mantle, and that is still today visible in her shrine in Mexico City. And that mantle, which was made of cactus cloth and should have disintegrated within 40 or 50 years, is still intact. And the image of Our Lady is on the mantle, the tilma, as it's called, in a way that no one is able to explain. It's been examined. It's not paint. It's something very, very particular. Indeed, the hand of God is written around me. So yes, Guadalupe stands out among all the apparitions as one of the most wonderful. Pope Benedict XIV in the pontiff during the 18th century, a representation came from Mexico to present him with a beautiful image of Our Lady of Guadalupe and to tell him the story of her apparitions. And he exclaimed in the words of the psalm, "God has not done thus for every nation," to indicate what favor God had shown to the people of Mexico and to all of America, and really to all of us, by the apparition of Our Lady.
When Our Lady decided to make herself manifest on Tepeyac, she chose a moment that was an extraordinarily significant moment in the history of the Americas. The moment when Christ had come to our shores, had been brought by the conquistadores, but there was that struggle of I mean, yes, there was a military struggle and everything, but the struggle was to explain, to bring the gospel to the land, to the Americas, and to have it make itself known to people who hadn't been prepared by, generations of civilization to receive it. They were tabula rasa in a sense, right?
Yes, there were certain elements in the Aztec religion, that was the religion at that time, which would have prepared them in a certain way, but they wouldn't have had any idea about the redemptive incarnation. And that was the great work of the Franciscan friars who came, and then there was not only the evangelization of the Native Americans. That was remarkable, because in a space of I think 8 years, some 9 million of the native people were converted and baptized, but also that the conquistadores, the Spanish explorers and settlers, would recognize the equal human dignity of the Native Americans and respect that. And then we have another situation going on, which was truly diabolical, was the practice of human sacrifice. The
Yes.
Aztec religion had been corrupted by a belief that the god required human blood so that the sun would rise every morning. And so they literally slaughtered thousands of people on these pyramids, opened their sternums with a sharp blade, and then tore out their hearts so-called to appease the gods. Well, with the coming of Our Lady of Guadalupe, that practice ceased. And then, as you said so beautifully at the beginning, the people were drawn together to form a proper mestiza culture, a mixed culture, with the Spanish and the Native Americans, and all the people recognizing that their mother is Our Lady of Guadalupe, the Virgin Mother of God.
That's so beautiful. And when she talks to San Juan Diego, she calls him my little son.
Yes,
And it's
yes.
so pretty. And that's how Mexicans speak to each other. They say mijo, mijito, mijita. And it's a very beautiful, tender thing that's so human. Like, she entered into this humanity, this human relationship of motherhood and childhood, and to all of us it means so much. And bringing it to your beautiful shrine that you built in La Crosse 15 years ago, I feel like, and maybe you can elaborate on this, that this is another moment, another very important moment where the Americas have to be evangelized all over again, and that Our Lady is a crucial element.
Well, one of apart from the exhortation of Pope St. John Paul II, that in America, on the continent of America, that Our Lady should be honored, particularly under her title of Our Lady of Guadalupe. There was also, in my mind, the anti-life culture, the anti-family culture, which was becoming ever more predominant in our nation and in other nations as well. And Our Lady completely purifies us of these anti-life and anti-family notions, because she is the great mother of life. She's the one who teaches us to respect the divine law written in our human nature and written in all of creation. And this is what happened, in fact, in Mexico at that time. The conflict between the conquistadores and the native people ceased, and this horrible practice of human sacrifice ceased.
And I hope it's not too aggressive of me to say this, but I feel that we are practicing human sacrifice on a tremendous scale.
No,
today.
it's absurd. It's not aggressive at all. I mean, this is infanticide. We have political leaders who are in favor of the killing of infants in the womb, even in the birth canal, at the moment of their being born. I mean, this is human sacrifice of the worst kind, and you're quite correct.
I feel very surprised that more people don't recognize that they don't recognize that children are being sacrificed on the altar of adult just lasciviousness, really, and adult disorder and adult irresponsibility, and the children are being sacrificed much the same way that the Aztecs practiced.
Exactly. People want to be able to do whatever they want, and then should a child be conceived, then they think that they can kill that child. Well, that's completely wrong. And so Our Lady teaches us to respect every human life from the moment of conception to the moment of natural death, and to promote and foster human life. And at the Shrine of Our Lady of Guadalupe in La Crosse, one of the beautiful areas is the Memorial to the Unborn, and there's a beautiful bronze statue created by a Mexican artist of Our Lady of Guadalupe seated and holding three little infants in her arms, and the whole area is dedicated to the gospel of life, and many people have inscribed in that beautiful area the names of children that they've lost through miscarriage, and then this is also a great message about the evil of abortion, and so that's a very powerful area, and many people like to spend time there praying.
Many people are affected by abortion and they carry those wounds always, and I think encounters like this with these shrines and with a real experience of God's mercy that we see in Our Lady can cure them.
Yes, I remember one time when I was a young priest, someone said to me, it must be very difficult to convince a woman who's committed abortion that it is a sin. And I said, no, the great difficulty is to convince them that God could ever forgive them, because these poor women, either in part by their own wrong judgment, but also many times pressured by various people to have an abortion, they suffer intensely, and it's very difficult for them to understand how God could forgive that they acted against that their fundamental nature to be a mother. You were mentioning before, and I say, how can people not see this great evil of a million abortions, more or less, a year in our country? And I think it is because the culture tries to mask the reality, and people don't think about what is actually happening in an abortion. But when they are brought up close to the reality, then they wouldn't want to have an abortion. For instance, these ultrasounds that are done now of a pregnant woman, when the women see this and their husbands see this, then they understand that abortion it's not simply removing some growth from your body, but this is a living human being that's in the process of developing and growing in the womb to be born. And so I think that we need to speak openly and plainly about what abortion is, and also what the gift of human life is.
Your Eminence, your shrine, how is it connected to the basilica in Mexico City? Is it a place of pilgrimage and at the same category, at the same level?
Yes. So some years ago, after having talked with the rector of the basilica in Mexico City, I wrote to the Pontifical Council. At that time, it was called the Pontifical Council for the New Evangelization, and asked whether the same graces gained by a pilgrimage to the shrine of Our Lady of Guadalupe in Mexico City could be granted to the pilgrims who make a pilgrimage to her shrine in La Crosse. The reason I asked it, the principal reason, was that there were many faithful Mexican Catholics especially who had asked a favor from Our Lady, and what if the favor were granted, they promised they'd make a pilgrimage. But it's not so easy for them to go back to make that pilgrimage. And the congregation, or the Pontifical Council, responded favorably. So, I mean, we've always had a strong bond with the Basilica in Mexico City. In fact, there's a statue when you enter on the grounds of the shrine that the then Archbishop of Mexico City, Norberto Rivera Carrera, a statue of St. Juan Diego, he gave to us as a sign of the bond. And then also he sent a very, very big piece of the rock of Tepeyac, which is by the side altar to St. Juan Diego. And he came when we had the 10th anniversary of the dedication of the church. Cardinal Rivera Carrera came and spent 5 days at the shrine, and it was a wonderful celebration. But the important thing is for people to know that they can fulfill the promise of a pilgrimage to Our Lady of Guadalupe by making a pilgrimage to the shrine here at La Crosse.
I'm glad to hear that, and I'm glad our listeners are hearing that. I often speak to friends that go to Medjugorje, for instance, or they travel all the way to Lourdes, and these are very, very costly and trips to make your pilgrimage, and they're wonderful. And then I suggest Mexico City. I said it's just so close, and it's Our Lady of Guadalupe, the Empress of the Americas. So how wonderful to know that you can have that same
yes, of course,
favor.
we're always encouraging pilgrimages to Mexico City, because there the pilgrim is directly in front of the miraculous tilma. But in the meantime, pilgrimages to her shrine at La Crosse also bring tremendous graces.
Will you be having a big celebration for the anniversary, for the 15th year anniversary?
Yeah, we did have it already on the 31st of July. That's the day that the basilica was, or the shrine church was consecrated, and we had a very beautiful celebration. And even though it was a weekday, a Monday, the church was full, and there was a wonderful group of pilgrims from all over. There were pilgrims from the south and the west, and of course the area in the Midwest, and it was really a beautiful celebration.
Cardinal Burke, I'm sure when you were building the basilica, you probably had pushback from people saying things like, because right now, I'll tell you, in our parish, we're building a big, beautiful church. It'll be ready in September or October. And there's people who criticize and they say, this money should be spent on the poor, or this money could be spent on social outreach. I'm sure that you had similar experiences with people that were negative. Do you feel? But I was gonna suggest that you must feel that the benefits that are accruing to all of us by the presence of the shrine are definitely worth it.
Oh, yes. Right from the beginning, there were very critical people. Also, people were very enthusiastic. And even to this day, some people say exactly what you said. Well, this money should be given to the poor, or given for Catholic schools or whatever. And my point is the point that our Lord made. He said, the poor you will have always with you. In other words, we're always to be about the work of caring for the poor. But you won't always have me with you. In other words, we have to show special honor, do the most beautiful things for our Lord to be close to him, and then he will help us to do what we need to do to feed the poor, to educate the ignorant, and so forth. And that's exactly what happens. I mean, I know so many of the pilgrims here at the shrine, and they're people faithful who are deeply involved in many works of charity, of education, and many missionary works.
Mm-hmm. Well, Cardinal Burke, our time is up, and I don't want to keep you. I know you're a very busy man. I can't thank you enough for making time for us, and you're in my prayers, and I encourage all our listeners
so much.
To pray for you and all the good that you do to the church and to all her faithful.
Well, thank you so much. I'm so pleased to meet you, especially that you're a Guadalupana.
Welcome back to Conversations with Consequences on EWTN Radio. I'm your hostess, Dr. Grazie Christie from the Catholic Association. We are thrilled to have Carrie Gress with us. She's an old friend of the show. She's one of the beautiful minds behind Theology of Home. And they are out with a new edition called Theology of Home at the Sea. These are beautiful books for perusing and for coffee tables, for sharing with friends. Carrie has a PhD in philosophy, and she joins us with a sneak peek at her new book as we are rounding out the summer months. Welcome to the show, Carrie.
Great. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here with you
Carrie,
today.
we love to hear about Theology of the Home on Conversations with Consequences, and we had to have you on because you have a new installment of Theology of the Home, and it's called At the Sea.
I do, yes. Theology of Home 3 at the Sea is what we just released, and it's a little bit different format than the previous books. We were actually just focused on a main theme instead of really digging into the elements of home or homemaking or whatnot. So anyway, it's been a really fun project to work on.
Now, remind our listeners, what is Theology of the Home? What's the idea, your motivating foundational idea there?
Yeah, Theology of Home is really based on this idea that our homes are meant to be a foretaste of heaven, that we are they're a place where we become saints, really, and that's the purpose of them. And what we really have tried to do with these is help women understand those essential principles, but also help us understand ourselves as women. It feels like there's been just a huge loss of what it means to be a woman in the culture today. And so we're trying to provide women with both a visual as well as mental kind of grammar for, understanding of ourselves as women, and how do we think through that and talk through that and speak about it in ways that make sense and that are compelling, as opposed to what we are getting in the culture, which of course is really erasing women.
Carrie, when I think about, and I think a lot of people are this way too, when I think about my home being a breeding ground for saints, right? Like for me and my husband and the children and whoever happens to be coming in and out of our home. I tend to focus on the interpersonal relationships at home, like how we treat each other, the courtesy with which we treat each other, the love which we bear each other, the peace that is in our home. But in Theology of the Home, you open up a whole other a whole other way, a whole other section of this, making your home a breeding ground for saints, which is in the visual aspect of the home, the way the home affects you in its order and in its visual beauty. Do you think why do we tend to not put so much emphasis on that in our heads when we think about the importance of the home?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question. And one of the reasons we got into this was just recognizing how important the home is for really everybody, and how much women are spending in particular on their homes. It's billions of dollars goes into this industry. And for us, it wasn't really a question of just vanity. Obviously, there are people that are doing these things for vanity or to keep up with the Joneses or whatnot. But we know that the home is really important and vital for our life as a family and whatnot. So, I think your articulation is great and super important, and all those elements of working on relationships and peace and hospitality and all of that goes into it. But it's also, there's some practical elements that can go into it. And, these are things that don't have to be expensive. It's, basic things like bringing order to a home, or, in my case, getting rid of the piles or whatnot. And so those things can speak volumes, I think, in a home where all of these other elements are really nurtured. The elements that you mentioned, to people that come in from the outside, that they're going to pick up on that, even if it's not a home that's elegantly laid out, it still is going to speak volumes to what the people in the home love and value and think is important, and that gets conveyed to the guest.
And what does it do for us who live in our home? What is the appearance of our home, the order of our home, do for us spiritually?
Well, I mean, I think there's certainly that element of order brings harmony. It's this is one of these great elements of what beauty is. Order is a part of that symmetry. So there's that piece, but certainly it also has a lot to do with what we fill our homes up with. There's going to be a big difference between a beautiful piece of art versus, a poster that you got when you were in the 1980s or something. There's very distinct things are going to be evoked in a soul that sees those things day in and day out. There's a great story about, in history that the Russians always had an icon in their homes. And when the communists came in, they didn't know where to look in the homes because you always reverenced the icon when you came in. But they always saw everybody looking at the clocks. So they started looking at the clocks and reverencing a clock. Anyway, I think it's those kinds of transitions that have taken place in our modern culture that, we've replaced an icon with a clock. And that tells us a lot about modernity and where our focus is and productivity and whatnot, and how we've moved away from the spiritual. So it can be very simple things like selecting a beautiful icon, and there's plenty of them that are not incredibly expensive anymore that can be purchased in places like Etsy, that we can put on our home that you see when you come in the home or leave the home or whatnot. So there's a lot of really simple ways that we can make our home feel a lot more like a sanctuary when we start thinking about it, I think, more deeply.
You connected it, this theology of home, you connected it to our womanhood. What's the connection there?
Yeah, well, I mean, the reality is homes don't make themselves, and there has to be a homemaker. And of course, that term has been very out of vogue for a long time. And actually, I'm researching a new book right now and just really digging into the roots of how it actually came from the Soviets. It was really the Soviets that said that the home was no longer important. And we've really absorbed this dramatically over the last 50, 60 years and not really realized that we've got these communist dictates that have come down to us and have become very popular and that we've really latched onto. I think that there's that it's very much tied to women because, of course, women are the first home for their children biologically. And I think in a lot of ways our homes reflect us to a certain extent, our characters and personalities and the different attributes that we have. I think the home is just incredibly important for understanding woman. That's not to say that men don't help out in it, but this is, we're trying to balance things out a little bit because, of course, it's become so taboo to speak about women in the home, and go back to this idea that, all the things that people do in the home have become popular again. So why don't we just talk about homemaking again instead of allowing this to be a communist taboo that we've been living with?
I love that connection to communism. I mean, who knows how many things we do because the communists taught us, right?
Right. Yeah.
But that is I mean, that's one thing they do immediately is they wreck the family and the home and that nucleus where the family hearth, right? They tear it apart so that the state can be everything. You know, when you go into a man's house, a man who lives by himself, if, you know, maybe he's a boy in a dorm or a young man in a dorm, or a man who goes by himself, you look at each other, you and your friends, and you say, this house needs a woman's touch, right?
Right.
Things are not looking, things might be orderly, they might be clean, but there's a harmony missing when a woman's not around. Is that a fair thing to say?
Yeah, I think generally it is. But I can think of certainly designers who have incredible eyes as well. So, but there's a lot to be said for the woman's touch in so many ways. And I think I'm one of those women that I'm not a great decorator, so I have a lot of admiration for women who are. I think it's just an amazing skill to be able to bring together things and style them and just make it look amazing. You know, I could take the same objects and move them around all day long and not come up with something nearly as beautiful as some of these women that I know. So I just admire it so much, and I think that it really is a great gift that we give our families when we can provide these things.
Women also seem to have a greater source inside themselves of this desire to go a little extra further in the home. So, for instance, my husband and I always laugh about the number of pillows on beds, right? And it's definitely on the X chromosome. You need 2 X's apparently to have more than 3 pillows on a bed. Because a man's like, that's enough pillows. And a woman's like, no, we need more pillows to round it out and to make it symmetric. And men are like, no, I don't want to go to bed and have to, take off 12 pillows off my bed and then range them all back on in the morning. What quality is that of women?
Yeah, no, I think that's, we have the same argument in my family as well. So I certainly understand that. Yeah, I think it's one of those, elements where there's a sense that comes to a place, like you said earlier, where it feels like there's something harmonious and where it feels, even to the degree of talking about things like a sanctuary. We love sort of that hotel effect. I mean, how many times do people say, I want my main bedroom to feel like a hotel, or the main bathroom, all of that, I think,
master bathroom
sense of being pampered. Yes. The master bathroom. But I think that, it's really this desire to make our homes a sanctuary and to feel like attention and care and detail are really being attended to, and to show that our love for others through that. We also have women that love to do that through their cooking, who are just amazing cooks. And, they're in there slaving away and you think they're just working so hard and they're miserable. And then you see the delight on their face when, their loved ones are eating an amazing meal. So yes, it is that question of going the extra mile for those that we love and wanting to nourish them and help them be the people that God meant them to be by giving them this environment where they can grow so well and easily. Now, of course, those are not the only things that go into it, but those I think are really fundamental pieces in terms of raising a family and helping them understand order and harmony and whatnot.
In my experience, I tend to go overboard when it comes to my house and my garden. Like I worry about it too much and I think about it too much, and I'm always trying to rein myself in and say, how much of this is me wanting to have the most peaceful and harmonious and lovely home for my family, and how much is it just vanity, right? Like if I can have 8 beautiful fruit trees in my garden, why can't I have 10, or 12? How far does this have to go? What do you think about that balance?
I think that balance is just going to be a piece of every woman's life. There's so many things between time and money and vanity and necessity and need that just really go into it. And I know I have that struggle myself. In fact, this summer I've employed my sons to take care of my garden for me because I just haven't had time for it. Otherwise, it probably would have all gone to seed. But it's those little ways in which we try to really balance things out and figure out where the priorities are. And sometimes we're in seasons of life where the garden just can't be the focus. It's got to be something that we put down the road. Other times we have the capacity to focus on something external like that, or maybe it feels more vital. Maybe it's something that that's where your prayer time is. So I think it just comes down to the individual and just feeling like you're working within your means, whether it's time or money, and really focused on growing in virtue. And I think that, there's nothing like a garden to show us how to really raise children. And that's just an important element that so many people, are fed by, and why I love even the fact that my own sons are beginning to understand that concept of nourishment.
Carrie, tell us about the book, At the Sea. Why the sea? What's the connection of the sea to femininity, to our religion?
Yeah, no. So this third book, Theology of Home at the Sea, was just really a delight to work on. The big thing was really thinking about the sea is obviously such a big and immense topic, something that we loved, but we thought, how do we tackle this from a very feminine perspective, from a very womanly perspective? Because of course there's so much about the sea that's super masculine, thinking about Moby Dick or the Master and Commander series, or any of this great literature that has been written about navies and all kinds of things, wars and whatnot. So we really wanted to press into how do we look at women from this perspective. And so obviously much of it has to do with recreation and those great memories that are made with families at the beach. But there's also certain things like the nature of the sea that we have to respect, that I think, people like surfers and sailors respect the ocean. They understand the waves, they understand the danger. But we don't always think about that when we're talking about women and the nature of womanhood. Instead we're sort of polluting it with different chemicals and trying to overcome the nature of womanhood instead of really working with the human nature that God has created. So it's fun to look into that. It was also we brought in people like Penelope from the Odyssey. There's this very faithful woman who's waited for her husband some 20 odd years to return from his Odyssey. And so we looked at that. We also talked to a woman that I know from Poland that her whole family they were all worked on the sea in one capacity or another. So it was just really interesting to sort of dive into this from a woman's perspective, but also kind of get some more just insights into womanhood through exploring this one theme.
Well, these are delightful books, Carrie. Thank you for writing them and for making them so beautiful. They're perfect coffee table items, because when you have a guest and you welcome them with hospitality in your beautiful, orderly, peaceful home, which is a garden growing saints, then those are the beautiful books that people pick up on your coffee table and come away even more refreshed. So thank you. And where can our listeners find your books?
They can certainly go to theologyofhome.com and purchase them there. I'm always happy to sign them for people, or they can be bought on Amazon or Tan Books or any place that Catholic books are sold. And on your
website, is there more explanation and writing about Theology of Home?
Yeah, no, absolutely. All of our books are there, but we also have a daily blog that we use a lot of the insights from Theology of Home to send out to readers on a daily basis. We're trying to help women really understand what it means to be women and to be faithful and to be homemakers. And even if being home isn't the only thing that you do, but it's an important element, I think, for all of us.
What a wonderful project, Carrie. I can't think of anything more important right now, especially in the state of the world. We have to make our homes as just lovely as possible. The place where everybody wants to come back to.
It's true.
Every morning, the Catholic Association reviews all the latest news and sends our subscribers a carefully curated collection of the most important news of the day. Items are specifically selected for a smart Catholic audience like you. Don't let the world take you by surprise. Subscribe to our daily media roundup at thecatholicAssociation.org. And now, Father Roger Landry offers us, as is customary, a short and inspiring homily to prepare us for this Sunday's Gospel.
This is Father Roger Landry, and it's a privilege to be with you as we enter into the consequential conversation the risen Lord Jesus wants to have with each of us this Sunday, when Jesus will give a pagan woman the greatest compliment he ever gave anyone. It's the type of tribute he wanted to give to every one of his fellow Jews, the accolade he wants to bestow on every Christian, the commendation he wants to say to each of us now and later when we meet him face to face. Great is your faith. Jesus' praise of the woman in this Sunday's Gospel wasn't cheap. It was the result of the way the woman responded to the terrible predicament of having a possessed daughter and all the problems that likely contributed to that possession and followed upon it. Jesus' admiration was also the result of her dialogue with him that would have tested her faith to the limit. It was the end result of a process of growth and faith that culminated with Jesus' amazed acclaim. In Sunday's Gospel, we're able to enter the scene and learn from the Syrophoenician woman how we too can grow in faith so that our faith too may become genuinely great. The question we ought to ask at the outset, however, is whether our faith is great or small or just average right now. Are we living by faith part-time or full-time? Is our relationship with our triune God the most important aspect of our self-identity? Jesus once wondered aloud whether, when he returned, he would find faith on earth. If Jesus were to come right now, would he compliment us like he praised the Canaanite woman? Or would he say of us what he often said of some of his closest followers, as we heard last Sunday, "O you of little faith"? Most of us, if we're honest, might respond like the man whose son Jesus healed of possession, to whom Jesus said, "Everything's possible to one who has faith," and who replied, "Lord, I do believe, help my unbelief." This Sunday, Jesus gives us that assistance through his interaction with this Syrophoenician woman. We see her great faith shine and grow in 3 tests Jesus gave her. The first test happened when she went up to Jesus and called out, "Have pity on me, Lord, Son of David. My daughter is tormented by a demon." In response to that Kyrie eleison, Jesus just gave silence. St. Matthew, an eyewitness, tells us he didn't say a word in answer to her. It seems almost a cruel thing to do to a desperate mom. Jesus, however, who almost certainly was prepared to work the exorcism, wanted to effectuate another miracle that day, a greater one for the woman, for the disciples with him, and for all of us. To do that, though, he needed to try her faith. He did so first by his silence. Even though he was seeming to ignore her, the woman didn't give up. Her second attempt was intercession. She ran up to the disciples and asked them to intervene. We can imagine her grabbing on their clothes and arms, raising her voice, begging their assistance. The disciples had had it. They approached Jesus and said, "Send her away, for she keeps calling out after us." They're asking Jesus to work a miracle just to get rid of a bothersome lady. Jesus refused their advances too. He said, "I was sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel." Jesus treated her as if she were a pagan have-not. It would have been easy for her to wallow in self-pity and go away dejected. It would have been easy for her, out of frustration and disappointment, to call Jesus and the apostles hypocrites and heartless. But she wasn't going to give up. Having been rebuffed that second time, she ran up to Jesus, fell down on her stomach before him and begged, "Lord, help me." Help is one of the most poignant expressions that exist in any language. Most people come running when a woman begs for help. Jesus, however, responded, "It's not right to take the food of the children and throw it to the dogs." We don't know if Jesus said this with a wink in his eye or with a tone in his voice to soften it. But the expression Jesus used was hugely insulting. In the ancient world, most dogs were stray, eating your trash, going to the bathroom at your front door, attacking kids when they were playing in the field. To call someone a stray dog in contrast to children was about the most denigrating thing that could have been said. Many of us, if we had been called by Jesus something like that, might have just stopped in our tracks and wept or sought to defend our disrespected dignity. This woman didn't. Instead, unbelievably, she agreed with Jesus. "Yes, Lord," she said, "but even the little dogs eat the scraps that fall from the table of their masters." She changed Jesus' word dog into little dog, saying that even puppies and chihuahuas eat the crumbs that fall from the kids' table. She was essentially saying that even if she and her daughter were insignificant little dogs incessantly barking, even if they were not worthy to receive what the children of the King receive, she was professing her faith that Jesus was indeed King, Lord, and Good Shepherd of the tiniest poodles, and even the littlest crumb of his mercy would be enough to work the exorcism of his daughter. Jesus was deeply moved by the woman's persistence, trust, and deep theological understanding. So he proclaimed what had been gradually revealed over the course of their dialogue. "O woman, great is your faith." Her faith was not crumb-like in size. It wasn't the size of a mustard seed. It was much bigger. And faith like that, Jesus said elsewhere, can move mountains. Jesus then worked the miracle the woman had been requesting and did so at a distance. Let it be done for you as you wish. In echo of what another woman of great faith, his mother, had said to the Archangel Gabriel. St. Matthew tells us that the woman's daughter was healed from that very instant. But the mother didn't know that until she returned home. So that was the last test of faith, to go on her way, trusting that what the Lord said would take place. Sometimes the Lord uses similar, non-conventional, difficult means to help us grow in faith. He often responds to our petitions with silence. Today we can ask, when we pray and don't seem to get a response, how do we handle it? Do we give up, stop praying, think God doesn't care, and drift away? What God is often doing in these circumstances is giving us a chance to learn how to pray perseveringly so that we may grow in faith and perseverance in general. And Jesus would like us to respond with this perseverance similar to the woman. When we encounter favoritism in the church, people who only want to serve the lost sheep of whatever fold they're interested in, when we don't seem to be in the in crowd, when we're not treated in accordance with our dignity as the Lord's sons and daughters, do we storm off in anger? Do we sulk? Or do we persist? When people who are supposed to be acting in Jesus' name insult us accidentally or seemingly intentionally, when they call us dogs or worse, when they scandalize us compared with the way we anticipate these spiritual figures should behave, do we allow it to lead us to commit spiritual suicide, cutting ourselves off from Christ? Or do we continue to draw out the good in people with holy intransigence and wit? At the most general level of all, when we encounter contradictions to our faith, when our prayer doesn't seem to work, when those we count on initially don't respond as we hoped, do we continue to fight the good fight and keep the faith, or abandon both fight and faith? Today, as students are in various places returning to school, as many employees are returning from vacation, as classes to become Catholic are about to recommence, the Lord wants us to convert these new beginnings into opportunities for our faith to grow. He teaches us that the path to become great in what is most important in life is not an easy path or expected, but one that's meant to forge us in a crucible to become truly heroic in our loving trust in God and our loving care for others. This Sunday at Mass, we'll meet the same Lord the Canaanite woman did. He will not give us leftover crumbs from a table, but will nourish us first with every word that comes from his mouth, and then with himself as the bread of life. Let's ask him to give us the grace of holy perseverance in prayer, in the Christian life, and in the grace of faith, so that the Lord may say of us today, tomorrow, and as the day comes for us, great is your faith. Give us a seat with all the heroes of faith at the eternal banquet of God's children. May your faith be great and mine too. God bless you.
Thank you, Father. To learn more about Father Landry, check out his website. It's called catholicpreaching.com, and make sure to catch his writings at EWTN's National Catholic Register, where he's a regular contributor. A big thank you to all of our listeners for joining us today. I hope that this show was helpful. I hope that our conversations have consequences and that those consequences are fabulous for you. Go with our prayers. Morning, the Catholic Association reviews all the latest news and sends our subscribers a carefully curated collection of the most important news of the day. Items are specifically selected for a smart Catholic audience like you. Don't let the world take you by surprise. Subscribe to our daily media roundup at thecatholicassociation.org.